She dropped the champagne flute before I even said a word. It shattered against the ballroom tile. 100 people turned to look. Her mascara was already smudging, like she'd been crying before she saw me. Or maybe she saw me before I saw her. I'm not sure. What I am sure of is that I didn't plan any of this. I wasn't invited to her company's party. I wasn't dressed for it. I wasn't even supposed to be in that part of town. But there I was, holding a half-dead poinsettia in a plastic bag, standing under that chandelier, while the woman who used to be my wife lost control of her face in front of all her coworkers. And I just stood there, completely still, like a ghost. They say time slows down during moments like that. They're wrong. It doesn't slow, it fractures. You see everything in pieces. The wine dripping down her wrist. The uncomfortable cough from the intern with the glittery suit. The band awkwardly trailing off during All I Want for Christmas Is You, like they forgot how endings work. And her, shaking, mouth open, lips forming a name. Not Sebastian. Not God. Not even help. She said my name. And then someone pulled me aside. Security, I think. Or maybe one of her managers. Doesn't matter. They asked me what I was doing there. I didn't answer. Because how do you explain something you've been planning for 3 years, but still didn't mean to do? They say closure is a myth. I used to believe that. Until tonight. Until she looked at me like I was the villain in her story. After everything she did. But don't worry. I'll explain. I'll explain it all. Let's go back. Not to the beginning, but to the part nobody talks about. The part where you still love them while they're destroying you. It was a Tuesday. I remember because the recycling bins were on the curb, and I forgot to take ours out, again. She hated that. Said it made the house look lazy. That was her word. Not dirty. Not cluttered. Lazy. She always talked like our life was something being judged on Yelp. She didn't speak to me that morning. Just sipped her coffee in silence, flipping through her work emails on her phone, fully dressed before I even got out of bed. She wore those pale beige heels I'd never seen before. I asked, half asleep. New shoes? And she replied without looking up, they're not for you. I didn't know what that meant. I just laughed, stupidly, like I always did when I was confused by her. I used to think that made me the calm one. In reality, I think I was just the one being slowly boiled alive while mistaking the steam for comfort. That Tuesday was the last normal day we ever had. Except it wasn't normal at all. I just didn't know it yet. I went to work, came home late, and there she was, in the kitchen, barefoot, eating Thai food with 2 sets of chopsticks sitting in the sink. I asked who came by. She said she had lunch with her sister. Her sister lives in Maine. I didn't question it. I microwaved leftovers and asked her if she wanted to watch something. She said she was tired. I watched alone. Around midnight, I heard the shower running. I went into the bedroom to say goodnight, and I found her phone charging face down on the floor. The screen lit up when I picked it up, and a notification slid across the top like a razor. Can't stop thinking about your mouth. No name. Just that. I put the phone back. Didn't open it. Didn't touch anything. I just walked out, barefoot, into the hallway, and sat on the bottom stair for nearly 30 minutes, staring at nothing, my mind ping-ponging between denial and dread. I convinced myself it was a joke. Maybe from a friend. Maybe spam. Maybe a weird group chat. Because that's what you do when you know the house is on fire. You argue about whether the smoke smells like burning or not. The next morning, she acted like nothing happened. She kissed me on the cheek. She made eggs. She hummed while she watered the plants. And for a second, I started to believe maybe I imagined it. But then came Friday, and Friday ruined everything. That night, I got home early. I wasn't supposed to. Power outage at work sent everyone home. I thought I'd surprise her. I opened the door, and music was playing. Her playlist. The one she only put on when she was in the mood for something. Wine glasses on the counter. Someone's coat, not mine, on the chair. Her voice, laughing. A man's voice, too, low and warm and way too comfortable for someone who wasn't supposed to be there. I didn't storm in. I didn't yell. I just stood outside the door to the kitchen and listened to her say something I will never forget for as long as I live. She said, "He's so painfully average, it's like he doesn't even exist until he talks." And they both laughed. I left the house without being seen. I walked down the street with my keys in my hand and vomited in someone's hydrangeas. I sat in my car for 3 hours, watching the windows of my own home glow with someone else's joy. I didn't go back that night. I didn't go back at all. I didn't even confront her. Not then. Instead, I did something she never expected. I started watching her. Not like a psycho, not like a stalker, but like someone taking inventory of the damage before deciding whether to rebuild or burn it all down. Because sometimes, silence is the loudest scream you can give. And I was just getting started. There's something terrifying about realizing you no longer live in the same reality as someone you share a bed with. That everything you thought was real, the routines, the words, the little habits that made your life feel lived in, were actually scripted lines in a play you didn't know you weren't starring in anymore. I didn't sleep the night I heard her call me, painfully average. I didn't eat the next day. I just paced around my friend Owen's apartment while he was at work, staring at the wall like I was expecting it to speak. Every hour or so I'd check my phone, half hoping for a message from her saying it was all a mistake, some sick prank, some out-of-context joke I'd misunderstood. Nothing. The worst part? She didn't even notice I was gone. I let 2 days go by. On the third day, I came back to the house while she was at work. I told myself it was just to get clothes, toothbrush, documents. But I think I already knew I wasn't there just for a bag. I walked in, and the place smelled like vanilla candles, the cheap kind she used to say she hated. Her laptop was on the coffee table, screen open, unlocked. For someone so careful with appearances, she had a stupid blind spot for her tech. And just like that, I was in. No passwords, no firewalls, just her Google Chrome history, sitting there like a diary she never meant to share. The first thing I saw was a folder on her desktop called Tax Docs. Inside were PDFs, spreadsheets, and a file named S Weekend Plan. PDF. I opened it. Dinner reservations, hotel booking, spa schedule, 1 room, 2 guests, Saturday through Monday. Not a work trip, not a conference, a full-on romantic getaway. And she'd booked it using our shared credit card. I clicked into her Messages app. I don't know why I did it. Maybe part of me was still hoping I'd find some explanation, something stupid and innocent. But the thread was pinned to the top. A guy named Sebastian. The same name I saw flash once on our kitchen Alexa history a few months earlier. I'd asked who that was, and she said he was on her client list. I didn't question it. Why would I? Their texts were brutal, intimate, shameless. Photos, voice notes. One where she laughed and said, "He still makes the bed every morning like it matters. Like we're still married." Another one. "He thinks I'm working late tonight. Can you come over and bring that bottle you got from Sonoma?" And then, the most surreal part, a message from that morning, while I was still spiraling in Owen's apartment. I keep waiting for him to find out. It almost makes it more exciting. Like we're stealing time. I didn't know what to do. I closed the laptop. Sat on the couch. Just sat. For what felt like hours. And then something inside me flipped. I stopped crying. I stopped shaking. I think I stopped being whoever I was before. Because something became very clear in that moment. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't some messy emotional entanglement. She wasn't confused. She wasn't in pain. She wanted this. She was playing a game I didn't even know I was in. And I wasn't going to sit on the bench anymore. I grabbed my bag. Left the house. But before I closed the door behind me, I did something small. Stupid. Maybe petty. I turned off the Wi-Fi. Just that. No message. No confrontation. No closure. Let her wonder. Let her start to feel the edge of panic. Let her feel what it's like when the world you're controlling suddenly drops a stitch. I didn't answer her texts that night. Or the day after. Or the day after that. And the next time I saw her in person, she wasn't laughing. She wasn't humming. She wasn't glowing in candlelight. She was staring at me across a marble ballroom, shaking, hands trembling, while everyone watched her shatter into something she couldn't explain. But we're not there yet. First, you need to know what I found in the second folder. I didn't even mean to open it. That's the part that still eats at me. After reading those messages with Sebastian, I should have shut the laptop and walked away forever. Taken the high road, or whatever people say when they want to sound emotionally mature. But I didn't. Because this wasn't just a broken marriage anymore. It was something else. Something rotten. The folder was named Archived Client Files. Harmless enough, right? I assumed it was work-related. Some boring contracts or tax forms. I only clicked it because my hands were still shaking and I missed the Downloads tab by an inch. But once I saw what was inside, I couldn't look away. There were photos. Dozens of them. Not selfies. Not travel pictures. These were taken secretly. Some from behind a tinted car window. Others through apartment windows. Some at gas stations, grocery stores, cafes. Zoomed-in faces. Men. Always men. Each folder was labeled with a name and a date range. Some I recognized. Her clients. Her colleagues. One of them was her old college professor. But then there was one labeled M_ref, October to December. I paused. My initials. At first, I thought it couldn't possibly be about me. But I clicked. There were over 30 images of me, walking to my car, eating at a diner on my lunch break, standing at the pharmacy, even one of me inside our own living room watching TV, taken from outside the window. My stomach turned cold. My head felt like it wasn't attached to my body. I scrolled further. Inside the folder was a single document titled Behavioral Notes. I opened it. It was a log. A cold, clinical timeline of my day-to-day behavior. What time I woke up, how long I showered, what brand of cereal I ate, how many steps I took according to my smartwatch. She had everything. Even notes like, seems agitated when asked about work, avoids conflict, highly passive, doesn't notice when routine changes. Who writes that kind of thing about their husband? I scrolled further down. The last line read, subject is exhibiting signs of emotional detachment. Should be testable within 7 to 10 days. Testable? That word nearly stopped my heart. Was I part of some experiment? Some study? It didn't make sense. I mean, yes, she worked with corporate clients, but she was in public relations, not psychology, not tech, not surveillance. At least, that's what she told me. That was when the door handle clicked. She came home early. I snapped the laptop shut and bolted out the back door so fast I left my jacket on the kitchen stool. I don't think she saw me. If she did, she never said anything. That night, I barely slept. My brain was spiraling. What the hell was I actually married to? Who was this person I'd been sleeping next to for the past 4 years? A liar? A cheater? Or something worse? I called my friend Owen and asked him the dumbest question of my life. Do you think it's possible for your wife to be running some kind of personal project on you without telling you? He didn't laugh. He just said, you need to be really, really careful, man. The next morning, I got a burner phone. I moved the money from our joint account. Quietly. I didn't tell anyone where I was staying. I started digging through old messages, emails, anything I could find that might explain what that folder was. And I found it. One email, buried in the trash folder of her Gmail, sent from an address I didn't recognize, with a subject line that just said, update on EM data model, encryption confirmed. Attached was a spreadsheet I couldn't open, protected with a password. But the file name told me everything I needed to know. M_res0 Nance. Not a typo. Not a mistake. All caps. Labeled. Filed. I don't know what kind of project she was working on. But I wasn't just collateral damage from an affair anymore. I was a subject. A variable. A data point in some twisted process. And the woman I married was watching me through a lens I never knew existed. It wasn't about love anymore. It was about control. And I wasn't going to be controlled again. I started seeing labels everywhere. On receipts, files, emails. Things I never questioned before now felt coded, surgical. Her old to-do lists suddenly read like sequences. EM sleep log, reactivity. S3, dinner W/variant. I used to think she just had a weird way of organizing tasks. She was always neat, always precise. But now it looked like something closer to observation. Like I wasn't her partner. I was a pattern she was tracking. I became obsessed. I stopped caring about the cheating. Sebastian felt like a footnote now, some pawn or side effect of whatever she was actually doing. I didn't even know if he knew what he was involved in. Maybe he did. Maybe he was part of it. I didn't go back to the house. I stayed in a motel on the edge of town, the kind with flickering lights and permanent cigarette smell, the kind no one asks questions at. I didn't sleep. I spent nights downloading encrypted email viewers, scraping metadata from her old PDF exports, looking for something, anything, that would explain why my life had been turned into a file cabinet without my consent. And then something cracked. It was an old Dropbox account we used to share, back when we were planning a trip to Vancouver. I logged in out of impulse. We hadn't touched it in 2 years. But to my surprise, it was still active. There were 5 new folders, all created within the last year. Only one of them wasn't locked. It was called Echo. Routines. Inside, there were timestamps, notes, short audio files, and one video, labeled EM/VAR, Trial 3. I stared at the screen for a long time before pressing play. The video opened on a recording of our living room, taken from the corner, high up. Not a phone angle. Not a handheld. A mounted device. Which meant it had been installed without me ever seeing it. In the footage, I'm sitting on the couch, eating a sandwich, watching TV. Adele walks in, says something, muted, no audio. I nod. She smiles. Then she walks out of frame. On the top right of the screen, I saw a flashing line of text. Phase complete. Emotional baseline stable. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about watching me cheat. Or lie. Or fail. This was about watching me feel nothing. She wasn't testing how I reacted to betrayal. She was testing how long I could be manipulated without realizing it. I paused the video and opened the audio files. Most were white noise. Room sounds. But one stood out. Adele's voice, low and clinical. Subject remains unaware of non-consensual conditioning. Introducing environmental disruptions at controlled intervals. Emotional elasticity remains within acceptable range. Further agitation planned via social erosion. Social erosion. What does that even mean? The answer came 2 days later. I got a message on Facebook from someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Marla, a woman I dated briefly in college. She asked if I was okay. Said she'd received a weird message a few months ago about me. From an anonymous account. Claiming I was mentally unstable. Obsessive. A manipulator. I asked her to send it. She did. And the moment I saw the wording, I knew. It was written by Adele. I've seen her emails for years. Her tone. Her phrasing. Her fingerprints were all over it. She had reached into my past and rewritten me to people I hadn't even thought about in a decade. That's what social erosion meant. Isolation. Reputational decay. If I ever tried to expose her, she'd already planted seeds to discredit me. Quietly. Surgically. Like she was sanding away my entire identity, until no one would believe a word I said. I felt sick. The walls of the motel closed in. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was a campaign. And I still didn't know what the end goal was. I spent the next 3 days building a file. A real one this time, with screenshots, audio, logs, timestamps, backups. I bought a burner SSD and kept it on me at all times. I made 2 copies. One for me. One for a lawyer I hadn't contacted yet. I didn't know what I could even accuse her of. Emotional manipulation isn't illegal. But surveillance? Falsifying claims? Maybe. I emailed myself everything. Multiple addresses. In case she tried to wipe anything remotely. And then I waited. For a mistake. For her to slip. And she did. On the 6th day, she texted me for the first time since I vanished. We should talk. You're overreacting. Please don't do something you'll regret. She didn't say come home. She didn't say I miss you. She didn't ask if I was okay. She knew I knew. And now, she was scared. I waited exactly 2 hours. Then I replied with one line. Meet me at your company's holiday party. And that, dear reader, is how we get back to the night she dropped the glass. Because I wasn't there by accident. I wasn't there to make a scene. I was there to watch her finally break. The party was held in a glass building downtown. One of those modern monstrosities where the walls are all windows and everything echoes, like even the architecture is trying to keep secrets. I arrived half an hour early. Not to make a scene. Not to stir drama. I just wanted to see her before she saw me. I wanted to watch her move in a room where she didn't expect me to exist. And that's exactly what I did. I stood on the upper balcony level, behind a group of interns taking selfies, watching Adele from above like I was studying a stranger. She looked radiant, if I'm being honest. Dress cut perfectly, hair pinned back, face glowing with that particular kind of self-certainty only liars have. She was talking to a group of execs, holding a glass of wine, laughing like she hadn't built a secret case file on her own husband. I almost walked away. For a moment, I told myself it wasn't worth it. That this whole thing, the spying, the folders, the surveillance, the clinical breakdown of my personality, maybe it was all some strange career experiment gone too far. Maybe she didn't hate me. Maybe I was just a lab rat who married the wrong kind of scientist. But then she saw me. She was mid-laugh when it happened. Her eyes floated lazily across the room, doing that social scan everyone does when they're trying to pretend they're not looking for someone. And then they stopped. Locked. Froze. Her mouth stayed open, but the laugh never finished. Her fingers tightened around the stem of her glass just a second too long, and then it fell. The sound of the glass shattering wasn't that loud, but the room still went quiet. A few people gasped. One woman near her said something like, "Are you okay?" And Adele blinked rapidly, like she didn't understand the question. Her body shifted, but her eyes never left me. I started walking toward her. Not fast, not slow, just deliberate. I didn't care about the stairs. I didn't care about her colleagues. I didn't care that the VP of marketing was now clearly whispering something to HR. I stopped 3 feet away and said just loud enough for only her to hear, "You erased me before I ever left." That was the plan, right? She didn't respond. Her hands were shaking. I could see her pulse jumping in her neck like a trapped animal. And that's when I realized she wasn't just surprised. She wasn't just afraid. She was guilty. I continued, lowering my voice. I found the files. Echo. Routines. EM_variant. You should have encrypted better. Or maybe you wanted me to find them. Maybe that was part of the test, too. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Just a slow exhale, like she'd been holding her breath for years. Behind her, someone, Sebastian, I assumed, began approaching. I recognized him from the photo thumbnails. He looked younger in person. Softer. Not some mastermind, just another thread in her web. He said her name quietly, reaching out like they were rehearsing a scene, and that's when I saw it. Panic. Not from being caught, from being outpaced. She looked at me like she finally realized I'd stopped being the variable, that I was now the observer, that I had changed positions without her noticing. That terrified her more than anything else. "I'm not going to publish anything," I said. "Not yet, but I've made copies. I've sent them to 3 people. If anything happens to me, if even a rumor spreads about my mental health or personal life, those files go wide." "You don't understand," she finally whispered. "It wasn't what you think." I laughed. Actually laughed. "You spent a year watching me like a case study and gaslighting me out of my own reality. So please, enlighten me. What was it?" She looked around the room, then back at me. This isn't the place. But that's where she was wrong. Because I wasn't there to talk. I leaned in, close enough for no one else to hear, and said, "This time, you're the subject. And I've already started recording." Then I walked out. I didn't look back. I didn't wait for her to follow. I stepped into the elevator, rode it down to the street, and walked straight into the cold night with nothing but a burner phone buzzing in my pocket and the sudden, heavy awareness that this wasn't the end. Because 2 hours later, I got a message from an unknown number. No name, just a string of words that hit harder than anything she had ever said. "You've triggered a failover. You weren't meant to see the baseline logs." That's when I realized something I hadn't even considered. She wasn't working alone. I didn't sleep that night. The message came in around 1:24 a.m. Anonymous, untraceable, emotionless. Just 12 words. "You've triggered a failover. You weren't meant to see the baseline logs." 12 words that didn't sound like Adele. 12 words that sounded like infrastructure. I stared at the screen for a long time, the glow from the burner phone pulsing like it knew more than I did. Failover. That's not a word civilians use. That's systems language. Engineering. Network resilience. It's what companies use when things break, a backup system that kicks in automatically to avoid collapse. So what backup had I triggered? And who was watching it? I didn't go back to Owen's apartment. I knew better now. If Adele had been logging my behavior for over a year, she probably had tracking scripts buried somewhere in my old apps, my old devices. Even my contacts might have been compromised. She didn't need to put a tracker on me. She just needed to predict my routine and wait for me to return to it. So I stayed off the grid. I left the city. I drove 3 hours north to a cabin my uncle once used for hunting. It didn't have Wi-Fi, cell service, or heat, which was perfect. I lit a fire and sat on the wooden floor with the SSD plugged into a secured laptop, digging through everything I had. Until then, I thought I had discovered the full picture. Secret recordings, behavioral logs, reputation manipulation. I thought the horror was personal, psychological, cold, yes, but intimate. Something twisted between 2 people and their collapsing relationship. But I was wrong. Because that night, I found a folder buried inside another one. Not labeled EM this time. Just a string of characters, RZ54B. Inside were 8 subfolders, each named after someone I didn't recognize, at least not at first. But after cross-referencing the names with my email history and Adele's old party invites, I realized something disturbing. They were all people she'd introduced me to over the past 3 years. A barista we once chatted with at a pop-up gallery. A yoga instructor she said she took a class with once. A couple we had dinner with at some networking event. I had forgotten most of them. just background characters in the blur of city life. But every single one of them had a data folder. Every folder had the same structure: observation logs, pattern predictions, emotional mapping. She wasn't just doing this to me. She was doing it to everyone. And the worst part? Some of the logs weren't written by her. The metadata on half the files pointed to a different author. A set of usernames I didn't recognize, mostly alphanumeric strings. Some sounded like code, others like handles. Z4RCHON, Valent62, internal underscore echo underscore T1. Different timestamps, different locations. That's when it clicked. This wasn't Adele's project. She was a part of someone else's. I stumbled outside into the freezing air and threw up beside the firewood stack. The cold hit me like a slap. I couldn't breathe. My body didn't feel like it belonged to me anymore. My memories didn't feel like mine. Were all the people she'd introduced me to even real? How much of my life had been staged? Had I been recruited without ever saying yes? I went back inside and started tracing IPs and login points from the files she forgot to scrub. Most were masked through VPNs, but one location pinged clean for just half a second: a university server. Out of state. A research lab I'd never heard of, but with a matching project ID to the Echo. Routines dataset. I pulled the site. The page was blank. Just a single quote in the center. People don't need to be controlled. They only need to believe they are being watched. No links. No contact info. Just that. I closed the laptop and stared into the fireplace, wondering if I was part of a game I didn't know existed, or if the entire game was me. And that's when I heard it. A car. In the distance. Crunching gravel in the woods where no one ever drives. I killed the lights. Shut the laptop. Waited. Watched. The engine didn't shut off. Whoever it was didn't get out. They just sat there. Watching. Waiting. For hours. I didn't move until dawn. When I finally built up the nerve to peek from behind the tree line, the car was gone. But tire tracks were fresh. Clean. Deliberate. They wanted me to know they were there. And they wanted me to feel small. I knew what came next. This wasn't a breakup anymore. It wasn't even revenge. This was containment. And I was officially outside the parameters. By the time I left the cabin, I hadn't spoken to another person in 6 days. I hadn't checked social media, used my bank card, or answered a single call. I lived on stale instant coffee and paranoia. But I had everything I needed. The logs, the folders, the video footage, the message history, the metadata, copies of copies, in drives I now carried on me like spare organs. I was past the point of fear, past anger, past grief. I was a man buried alive who dug his way out with his bare hands. And now I was holding the shovel. But I still didn't know why. Why me? Why this? Why turn a marriage into a dataset? The answer came quietly, on a Monday morning, with sunlight slipping through my motel blinds and a knock at the door that didn't sound like a threat. It was Adele. Alone. No security. No mask. Just her, smaller than I remembered, eyes hollow, hair undone. For a second, we stood there in total silence, like two people standing on opposite shores of a frozen lake, waiting to see who would speak first. She didn't ask if she could come in. She just said, "You know now." I nodded. "I wasn't supposed to fall in love with you," she said. It wasn't a line. It wasn't a trick. It was honest. I could feel it in my ribs. And that's what finally broke me. I sat down on the edge of the bed. She stood by the window, her arms crossed like a defendant at a sentencing hearing. And for the first time in over 3 years, she told me the truth. Adele had been recruited during grad school for a project disguised as an emotional resilience study, funded by a private behavioral research group with ties to tech companies and psychological ops labs. Harmless at first: relationship tracking, communication metrics, behavioral drift patterns. But the deeper she got, the more invasive it became. She wasn't alone. There were others. Participants embedded in normal life, assigned partners, or reconnecting with real ones, and encouraged to observe, record, manipulate, escalate. Quietly, methodically. It paid well. Too well. And when she got paired with me, someone from her past, someone safe, quiet, easy to manage, she thought it would be simple. She never expected me to notice, to adapt, to resist. "You were never forgettable," she said, and I could see her fighting tears. "You were the one variable I couldn't control." I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw things. But I didn't, because I could see the weight in her eyes, not just guilt, but collapse. She was already outside the program now. She'd burned herself just by showing up here. Her actions were no longer under review. She was rogue, too. I asked her one question. Do you regret it? She paused. Every day. She handed me something. A password. One final drive. The one folder she hadn't saved locally. It contained names, contacts, timestamps, the funding channel, the masks behind the project. Enough for someone to take notice. Maybe not shut it down completely, but at least expose it. Light is a brutal disinfectant. She turned to leave. I didn't stop her. That was the last time I ever saw her. I didn't release the files publicly. Not all of them. I gave them to someone who mattered, an investigative journalist I trusted, someone with reach and restraint. I let them write the story their way. I stayed anonymous. I didn't want fame. I didn't want revenge. I just wanted my name back. It took almost a year, but eventually it came. Slowly, my name stopped being associated with whispers. The weird posts vanished. The old friends who ghosted me quietly started liking photos again. My credit stabilized. I got a new job. I moved to a new town. I got a dog. A real one this time. Not one that came with shared ownership clauses. And then one morning, I met someone. She wasn't like Adele. She was messy in the good way. Forgot her keys. Talked during movies. Had a laugh that cracked windows. I didn't tell her everything at first. But when I finally did, she didn't flinch. She just held my hand and said, "That sounds awful, but I'm glad you made it out." That's the thing they never tell you. Healing isn't some blazing moment of triumph. It's quiet, uneven, a little boring. It's skipping the party and sleeping in without fear. It's laughing and realizing your stomach doesn't feel like a clenched fist anymore. It's love that doesn't come with observation notes. 3 years ago, she told me I'd be forgettable by fall. Now, I don't even think about her unless someone brings up champagne. And even then, I just smile, because I'm finally living a life that doesn't need to be studied. It just needs to be lived.